I am here to talk to you today about how I got to be here talking to you today. Now, it's kind of a long story, but I promise it has a purpose. I'm here because I willingly applied, and I was excited to be able to share my thoughts and ideas and speak in a public setting. I got this opportunity through my university, which I'm attending because the company that I worked for paid for my tuition, and it gave me the motivation to finally get the bachelor's degree that I was never able to get years ago. The reason for that requires going back to when I was in high school, and I was the most shy person on the face of the planet, and I thought I would literally die if I had to take a speech class. And so, since I had to take speech class in college, I decided instead to go to pastry school. And that ended up leading to a whole string of different jobs where I worked as a cashier and a pastry cook, a cake decorator, a sketch artist. And eventually I met my manager, who ended up being the most influential person in my entire life. And he pushed me to step out of my comfort zone. And I soon found myself speaking in front of people and in front of cameras. And eventually I was facilitating to a bunch of youth and kids. And eventually that led to a job where I was working at Disneyland in a really cool costume, and I was basically showing hundreds of guests how to build lightsabers. And one day I found myself at my job standing on a stage in front of over 100 people and loving it. And that in turn led me here. And so, a lifetime worth of different, seemingly random moments somehow connected together. And you could say that the reason I am standing talking in front of cameras and real live people right now is because I was too scared to go to speech class when I was 17. Our lives are made of these moments and experiences and interactions and so much more, and they all link together in unique ways. In a similar way, your life has been filled with different moments that have linked together and formed a crazy path to get you to where you are in this moment, listening to me speak. Now, I'm not here to tell you to make every moment count or to count every moment. What I'm going to tell you is to connect every moment, to take the time to look back at your life and not just reminisce over the past, but to find those connections and connect the dots. I like to think of it sort of like those TV shows where there's a cop or investigator and they have this corkboard filled with different pictures and newspaper clippings, and they're all connected by a bunch of red string. That's what it's like to connect the dots of your life. It's not just one direct path, and it might seem really confusing, but once you can find those connections, it all makes sense and it's exciting. And there is a reason for connecting these dots and changing to this mentality. It allows you to look at life in a completely different light. When you can see the connections in your past, it changes your future in 3 significant ways. First, it allows you to live life with a perspective of gratitude. When you take the time to see the connections and what has influenced you and what people have been a pivotal or even trivial part of your journey, you are then able to deepen the value of even the simplest of interactions. Years ago, I used to catch the bus a lot, and I hated it because it was always late or I would miss it by just a few seconds, and so I spent a lot of time waiting at the bus stop. Now, one night after a long shift at work, I'd missed my bus again, and I was sitting there waiting, and this family walked past me. And as they passed, this little girl, she just looked up at me, and she said, "You look like a princess." Now, at the time, I was working as a fast food cashier. I still had on my costume and my hat and hairnet, and I smelled of burgers and fries, and I did not feel like a princess. But that moment was magical, and it made my night. And I suddenly felt grateful for all the events that had led up to making me late for my bus. I am grateful for that moment now, no matter how simple and small it was in my life. because I can see the connections. It made me feel pretty for just a second when I never thought myself pretty. It made me grateful for the future inconsistencies of the bus system. And when I would miss my bus, it was okay. I started to feel grateful for things I never would have felt grateful for before. And life's little irritations didn't mean as much. So when you have this mentality and you can connect those dots, it allows you to live a life of thanks for the big and the little things, to people like family, friends, even strangers, like the Starbucks barista who always spells your name wrong, because they are all playing a part in your journey. And honestly, when you live a life of gratitude, it just naturally brings along joy. And who doesn't want to live a life of joy? Now, another reason for this change in mindset is that it prepares you for the worst in life. When you can see the connections between the moments in your life, both the good and the terrible, you are able to gain strength and you can face future challenges openly and bravely. It makes you resilient. And so when you lock your keys in the car, or when you fail that exam, or when your spouse cheats on you, or when a loved one dies, you will be able to face those moments knowing they're just moments, points on your timeline that are going to connect in your future in some way, because you recognize the connections in your life before. So let's visualize a really, really terrible situation. Let's imagine, hypothetically, that in the midst of a worldwide pandemic that is just full of frightening and scary and stressful and depressing events that has turned your life upside down, you suddenly find out that your mom has been diagnosed with an early onset form of dementia at the age of 55, and she already can't remember your middle name. So now your world has basically come crashing down and you've never been so heartbroken in your whole life. And then you find out that you and dozens of your friends are being let go from the job that you loved more than anything in life, and where you wanted to work for the rest of your career. And so now all of your career hopes and dreams have come crashing down, and you're dealing with this major loss of identity. And then at this lowest point in life, you also realize that the company that you worked for is no longer going to pay for your tuition, so now you have to pay for the rest of your degree out of pocket, and you also no longer have a job. And then, let's say, hypothetically, you go out to your car and you find out that someone has sawed off its catalytic converter, leaving it undrivable and with close to $1,000 of repair bills. So just imagine how you would feel in that moment. Imagine how I felt in that moment. Because yes, that is how my last year went for me. Now, I could have sat down on the curb and just cried and asked God why this was happening to me and wallowed in how pitiful my life was at that moment. But I didn't. Because I knew that this awful, terrible, lowest point in my whole life was going to connect to something in my future. And months later, I can look back and see the connections. I can see how I met such a nice mechanic who I know I can go to for anything in the future. I had to catch rides from my friend for a week, and she helped me process the pain I was feeling over the loss of my mom and her diagnosis. I was able to empathize with a coworker who a few weeks later had the same thing happen to his car, and we became better friends from it. And honestly, I'm always saying that I want to know more about cars, and now I know what a catalytic converter is. And who knows how many more things this will connect to in my future. I do want to be clear though, that this doesn't make anything in life easier. When you get the call that your grandfather has stage 4 lung cancer and only has a few months to live, your heart is still going to break. And you may still ask God why this is happening, and there's no answer for you in that moment. But you'll be able to survive the moment because you'll know that it is going to make sense in your future. Maybe it's so later down the line you may meet someone who is dealing with the heartbreak of cancer and you can help them through their moment of pain. It is going to make sense, but you have to be able to realize that these moments will connect in your future. And that leads to my third point. When you are able to see these connections of your past, it allows you to open your future to experiences because you just naturally allow for more opportunities for moments to occur. When you are able to see the value in every moment for a future connection, maybe it's enough for you to open doors that you wouldn't have otherwise. For me, the perfect example of this is catching a ride in an Uber. I don't know about any of you, but the first time that I caught an Uber, I was so terrified. I remember waiting for the car and thinking, do I sit up front? Do I sit in the back? Do I talk to him? Do I tip him? Am I gonna die? I was so scared. But now I love them. I am always excited to see who my driver is gonna be, and I've had some of the most interesting and pleasant and bizarre conversations in an Uber car. Now, I don't just see it as a way to get from point A to point B, but it's an opportunity for something new. Years ago, I caught a ride and I just started a conversation with my driver and we had the nicest talk and he was just the nicest older man. And then over a year later, I caught a ride from a completely different place, but I had the same exact driver. And he remembered all these things about me, like where my family was from and what I did for work. And he said that he remembered me out of his thousands of passengers because I had just been such a pleasant person to talk to. We had become points on each other's lives that somehow intertwined and connected. And that 15-minute car ride to the airport from over a year prior suddenly had so much more meaning in my life. So much so that years later, I am now talking about it and sharing it with you right now. And all because I saw an opportunity and I took it and I started that conversation. Now, I'm not telling you all to start conversations with random strangers, but what I'm saying is that with this mentality, you may just be more inclined to seek opportunities. You may volunteer at that soup kitchen you've always wanted to, or maybe you'll call the cousin that you haven't talked to in ages. Or maybe the next time that you go to the grocery store and you happen to see an old colleague of yours, rather than looking at your phone and pretending not to see them, like I'm sure many of you have, I'm guilty as well, maybe this time you'll stop and wave and say hi. Who knows what are going to come out of these actions? Will any of my Uber ride conversations greatly affect my life? I don't know, but they could, and that's the exciting thing. Now, a very brilliant man also had this same mindset. And Steve Jobs, he put it perfectly when he said, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. And so I implore you to take the time to look back through your life and find the moments and connect those dots. Because when you do that, it will allow you to live a life of gratitude for everything, big or small, positive or negative, which leads to a life of joy. You will be able to endure the toughest moments in life. And you won't just survive them, but you'll be able to use them to better yourself and others. And you will expand your future opportunities because you will see every moment and experience as a possible connection to your future. So right now, it may not be the best moment for you. You may not be happy with who you are, and you just need to remember that this is a moment. It might be a long moment or a painful moment, but it's just a moment. A small dot in your life that may not make sense now, but you can trust that it will because you've made those connections before. I personally am so grateful that I was too shy to take speech class all those years ago, because it has led to this moment right here, which has now connected me in some way to all of you. None of us knows what this moment is going to have or what impact it will have in our future. But the only way for us to know is to take the time to look back in your life and connect the dots. Thank you.